Hey Fractal fans, it's Austin Buddy. Today we're going to talk about the 200 plus Bass TonePack. For anybody who buys this from December 25th on, this is the tutorial you need to do. I just did an update for it, December 2025. And if you did buy it then or went and downloaded it, if you go into your accounts right now for January 2026, which is when I'm making this video, the end of January, you will see that there's an update for January 2026. I found 5 little errors. They're all cab errors that I fixed. So I forgot to include a certain cab IR. So a lot of that stuff is covered in the release notes, which hopefully you've read, the new ones. So go back and read these. I did edit the December one. I left it alone because it's mostly correct. So I'm going to walk you through that here. I'm going to talk about what's changed in it because it is definitely different than what the 200 Bass TonePack was before December 2026. We've got new cool stuff from Fractal from the firmwares that I've incorporated. I've rearranged the basic bass amp section. I've rearranged the preset layout to make it a lot more CPU friendly, especially for non-turbo FM3s, which is what I make this on. I've got a lot more effects in it that are specifically bass oriented that I think are a little better in terms of chorus and phaser, even envelope filter, and we can talk about those in detail as this one goes on. So this video supersedes the old tutorials, which can still apply to some of the legacy units, but this will supersede those for the FM9, FM3, and Axe-Fx III Bass TonePacks that were available before December of 2025. And I just want to make that clear. Let's for newbies, let's just talk about what happens, what's in the file when you download it, and what those tools are, and walk through the things you need to do for that. Okay. So when you open up the zip download file, and you notice this says Bass January 2026, because like I said, I had to fix 5 little cab errors that I found, and I didn't include the correct cab IR for the high watt, and now it's in there, so you can get it. So the first thing you'll see is in folder 0 is the readmes. You will see the release notes. They're still dated December, although I did edit them to fix some of the issues about the IRs. So just use that. Don't think that there's a January one. It's the same thing. There's also a nice artist styles preset, which will walk you through what the artist styles are, what bass to use, what kind of strings were on there, pickups, those kinds of things. So that's a pretty cool thing. And then there are bass preset. The whole names for everything is in here too. So you've got good useful things and an overall user manual, which has been updated for all the things I'm about to talk about. So you've got those as resources. To install this TonePack though, and it tells you all this in the release notes, you've got to do a few things. The first thing you need to do is you need to install some very specific user cab IRs in your slots 51 through 64. And this talks about where those are. This is your user slots. Now, if you've bought this in the past, you already have most of these installed except for 2. And the 2 are user 160 acoustic bass B15 FET. This is from one of my cab packs that I sell through Fractal, but it's an Ampeg B15, or Fractal calls it the Portaflex amp. It's a nice IR for that. And then the one that I forgot to include last time, even though I had a cab pointed to it, is a nice, it says HJRCA. That is a Harry Joyce. That's a high watt with Fanes, I believe. And that's one that Cliff made publicly available on the forum, and I liked it very much. And so I've replaced the old things in these slots with these new ones. So again, if you've had the Bass TonePack for a long time, you just have to reinstall these 2 things because you need to install those for certain presets to work correctly. So please don't skip this step, and we'll talk about how you can do that pretty easily in a little bit. Next, in your file, you will have install the Bass TonePack. And again, right now I've got the FM3. It's on firmware 12 or higher. So this should work on higher firmwares. If you have a firmware less than 12, this is not, when you load these, they will look like they're empty. They're not empty. They were saved on firmware 12, and only firmware 12 or higher can read them. So be aware of that. Here is the overall 1-bank file. It all fits in 1 bank, and I'm very strict about that. I want this to be a 1-bank deal for you guys. But new is that I've also included individual bass presets from the unit. So not the divider sections, but the actual individual presets. So you can go in and you can definitely audition individual presets if you want to do it that way. So, and then of course, when you buy this, you always get a version for the Axe-Fx III. the FM3 and the FM9, you don't have to buy it 3 times. You can buy it once and you'll have it for any of those 3 units. And that's all these others, the exact same thing. It'll show the bank and the individual presets saved for those units. And then I included, don't spend a lot of time on this option, particularly if you're an FM3 person, but optional FC layouts. There's a whole video set coming about that. It's just how I do layouts that let me control things. It's more for live gold and naked amps than it is for this tone pack, but I am throwing it in every tone pack that I do now. So that's that. So I'm going to pull this off the screen for a minute, and then I'm going to pull up my FM3. Remember, if you see this symbol right here, this means that this preset uses a user cab in it. So if something doesn't sound right, if you didn't load those IRs like we're going to talk about, that's why, because you didn't load the user cabs in the right slot. Okay, so you can see on screen now that I have the user cab open over here underneath my picture in the screen. And there's a little PDF that tells you where they go, but they're also numbered to make it easy. Here is a way to load all those in pretty quick under Manage Cabs. So you open up Manage Cabs, which you can see right here on screen. And I've got a bunch of things in here. Let's go to 51 because that's the first one we're going to load in. You can see it in here, and it goes all the way to, on here, 64. So what you can do is watch this. If I go and grab and click on the first one of these in the zip file folder, and then I hit Shift, and then I hit the bottom one, they all light up. And now if I just drag this over to 51, watch what happens. It's going to write them on it. Now, to make sure I write it, I have to click Save. And I want to say yes, and it's literally writing them. That's what those dots were. And now it's done. So you got all of them in there, and you don't have to worry about anything else. Very simple. You can just click and drag individual ones if you that's easier for you. There's also a way to click and drag that in the cab block itself in the location, but I find this to be the easiest way to do it. And we're going to take a look at the new preset layout and the new presets. So as you can see, firmware 12, and it's every preset name is going to end with -25F, which lets you know that this is a new version of that preset, so you don't get it confused with older bass tone packs. And what I did here is I have gotten rid of the pick versus fingers stuff on purpose. I think you guys can figure out how to do that yourselves. And then I've divided up the Ampeg section, which is a big one, of SVTs into cabs that have a sub-kick blend. And those will be both SVTs and B15s. And then I've got the same B15s and SVTs with no sub-kick. And then I've got a section that's a little combo speaker cab section that just has a little bit of what happens if you blend for fun, like a 1x15 and a 2x10, just as an experiment. Then, of course, I've got Fender bass amps. And again, I'm keeping some of these where I have it dialed in to be kind of bright or normal, I think, and then darker if you like a darker bass sound like I kind of do. But I'm not a bass player. That's why I had to get a bass player to help me. Scott Nelson once again helped me with these. Marshalls, some high watts, and these are the ones that were not working from December because they were pointing to the wrong cab location and you didn't have the IR in slot 63. That's on me. My apologies, guys. It's fixed now. If you go in here now and you look at the cab, you'll see it points to user 63, and this is the cab you have to load in that slot. I've got Mesa Boogies in here. Those are all still, all the amps that were in there in the last time are there for the most part. A Galen Kruger, kind of an emulation. I figured out how to kind of get it to sound like a Galen Kruger. And then I have some miscellaneous amps over here. And this is a new section. If you look at it carefully, these are some of the new tools that were added in the November firmware. There's Royal Bass DI, no amp bass preamp, no amp bass DI, just DI and effects. And then the black glass pedal for probably, I don't know, the 12th time. I'm joking. But I think it's the 4th time, but he reworked it again. So I had to redial that in for everything. Now, the artist section is going to look exactly like it was before for you old-time users. There's nothing I've changed in here except in this preset, if I remember correctly, where I had to fix a fuzz that was better. But the others are pretty much like they were before. So don't expect big sound changes over here. It's what you've always come to know and love. There's a great acoustic bass emulation that uses a user cab again. Okay, with that done, let's go look at a preset. I'm not necessarily going to play a lot, but let's just pick like this Ampeg B15 1x15. For those of you who have been using the 200 bus before, you're going to notice this is different as a layout. The first thing that's different is that I am no longer trying to split off a DI in one stereo signal of an output and a bass amp on another side. It was too complicated, it was getting confusing, and it was starting to drive up the CPUs. So from now on, output 2 on an FM3 is going to be just a DI out. And on the Axe-Fx III and the FM9, it's going to be output 3. That's what this little shunt is over here. I use this and have to go to the FM9 Axe-Fx III, and then I'll move this out 2 up here, and I'll put an output 3 here. So that's why that's there. So your bass amp will come in here, and notice I do have a noise gate on. You can always turn that off by going here if you like. That's all up to you. Okay. And then the DI is going to come straight out here and down, and notice it's going to go this way, but it's got a volume pan, and it's going to go out here. And this volume pan is muted. So this is for the old scenes 5 through 8 where you blend the DI with the signal. So that I did preserve that, even though you now have a direct DI as well as your output. So you've got the best of both worlds by this design. So the second thing is I have new compressors. I'm changing this to show you the blocks and infos. New compressors, phasers, chorus, drive pedals, a GEQ filter, a post-cab GEQ, and then a final compressor. And I've redone these yet again from the last time because they're getting more and more refined and better. So you know what's going on because I have an ABCD for almost all of those except for the cab, and I'll explain that in a minute. The cab is a little different. The cab is going to have the speaker that's here in A, B, and C, but in D, this is new. D is not going to come up unless you go to it, but in D, I have put in a DynaCab for you. Now, you will have to dial in that DynaCab the way you like. I have a starting position and a mic, but it may not be what you like. But you now have it built into this. So if you don't like the way it sounds with the IR that I used, and I wanted to include those because some people are relying on those, you can come in and build your own DynaCab right here. The main thing about DynaCabs you have to remember is you want to make sure that you can match them to a good speaker impedance curve that is appropriate, because there are a couple of different bass ones you can try to see what you like. And if you want to ever try that, click this pin up here and you can try, like, there's a hard key 1x15, there's a Portabass 1x15, there's a 8x10 SV. So well, the Portabass usually sounded good on this one, and I used the one that I think sounds best. So that's the difference there. Now on the amp, what's going to happen is every time that you change the amp block, scene, it's going to change. It may change the amp or it may not. It may just add a boost. So for example, here, it's adding a little boost in front of the amp. It's the esoteric bass RCB. So that gets it a little warmer sound. It's not driving it hard. It's not distorting it unless you've got a high output bass, but it just adds it. So you've got these scenes that are clean, warm, gain, and driven, and then the same cleans, but with the DI and a post-cab compressor. So in 2, as I said, the drive comes on and makes it a little warmer. It's the same really the sound as an amp 1, but you can an amp A. But if you want to change the amp, you can, because it's a separate amp B here, but it's the same exact amp I copied over, and I just added the drive. Now in 3, no, we are actually trying to add gain at that point to the amp, okay? And in 4, we're adding drive, more drive, same kind of thing. It's a push into an amp that's already sort of gaining. But you, of course, can always use any drive block you want, because in addition to the esoteric bass RCB, I've got a black glass in here that's nice and gnarly. I've got an OD2250 gray, which is a little odd, but it's kind of cool sound. It's a different sound. And then I've got a Pi Fuzz for bass, which is very cool. And again, you can change those and make those whatever you want, but all the basic bass amp presets generally have that as the ABCD for the drives. Now the compressor is off, but you may want to make it default to be on. That's entirely up to you. It's staying off. The reason a compressor is good before an amp for bass, bass players understand this. Your low E is a lot louder and hotter and hitting the amp harder than playing a high note up on your 4th D string way up, or G string, I should say. And what a compressor is going to do if you engage it is it's going to kind of make those sounds be a little bit, the louder sounds are less loud, the lower sounds are louder, and then it turns the whole thing up. So you get a lot more even range of the notes that you play. That's the best way I can describe what compressors do the way I'm using it here. So it hits the amp a little more evenly so that you don't blot it out hitting a low E and then all of a sudden you get no note definition playing high up. This will help that. And so I encourage you to check out the compressors. I've also got a GEQ in here, and I just threw a couple of curves in there using the 7-band Boss GEQ bass pedal that Fractal is emulating here that just does a few little things, and you can experiment with this and try this out and set it up the way you want. This one's got a little scoop in it. They're just little subtle changes before it hits the amp. And then last, I've got a filter curve. And this was a carryover from the last one, the last version of the TonePack. Some of you remember this. There is kind of a nice thing that happens when you boost 700 on a bass. It kind of punches through the mix a little more. This is a 5 dB boost at 700. If you're doing a solo, this is a really good thing to do. It'll push you out a little bit. Behind the cab, there is another GEQ, and I consider this 5-band passive kind of like a Pultec EQ, and these are very musical shells. I really like this EQ a lot. Notice it says low, low, mid, 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 and high. So have some fun with this one. I did a couple of different things in here. You can make it do what you want. This is a really great place to sculpt your tone coming after the cab before it hits any kind of final compression if you want to go for final compression. And that is really the summary of the bass amp section. The outputs are flat, except for the output on the DI is down by 3 on purpose because the DI will come in much hotter than the bass amp signal in general, and you don't want it to blow out your unit. Now, a couple other quick things. If you're playing, I dialed everything in usually on a bass that's kind of more of a P-bass sound. So a jazz bass may be a little lighter. But if you're using an active bass, for example, and you find everything's hitting the amp really hot, come to the input 1 and just dial this output level down a few dB, maybe 4 or 5, depending on how active electronics you've got. And then everything will be fine in the preset once you do that. So just know that you've got that option to do that. I think this preset design is cleaner. It gives you some CPU room so you can try out other effects potentially and not run out of CPU on your unit, hopefully. It's not easy to do that, guys, because I've got 2 compressors and that can take up a whole lot of CPU. But I found a way to do it with this particular design. So I hope you enjoy this and you find this was very helpful. Again, this video supersedes the other older ones. I'm going to leave them up because some people may have the old TonePack for the Axe-8, and some of that stuff applies for the Axe-Fx II and the Axe-8. This does not apply to that. This applies to everything that was released since December 2025. And again, make sure you get the January download to fix the 5 little mistakes that I made. And have some fun with this stuff. I love these things. Getting this acoustic bass sound and using the artist presets. I'll probably flash up on the screen here a little bit of the artist list. But, you know, I tried to cover a lot of ground here. And a lot of people tell me this is all they need when they're doing recording. They come in here and they can always find a sound that works perfect for them. So, guys, you can also audition individual presets if you prefer to do it that way. And there's a couple of ways to do that. Go to Tools, Manage Presets, and then you come over here and you go to Browser and you say Open Directory, and then you point it to that directory. In this particular case, it's going to be the FM3 version, and we're going to go to Individual Bass Presets, and we're going to say Open, and there's the 115 presets that are in here. And remember, each preset has at least 4 sounds unique. Usually most of them do. So if you click OK, what's going to happen is this browser show hide is going to show them. You got to do the show hide thing. Make sure you can see that. And these are all the presets. Now, they might want to sort them by date because that's the order they're in for the TonePack. But you can literally, you know, go to a spot here. Let's say this empty spot. Let's say you want to try out the 4x10. If you click Auto Audition, on the front of your unit and you click this, you'll see it on the front of your unit and you can play it. You can change scenes and you can do all of that. And if you like it, then you can just drag it over like this and click save. And so that's one way you can go through and just find presets that you like without having to load them all up in a bank. So that's a pretty cool trick. So again, I'll just refresh y'all with that. I'm going to do it a second time because it went kind of fast so you can see it. Manage presets. You may not see it, so that means you have to come over here and you have to open it. Show hide. Then you say open directory, and then you point to all those individual bass presets, that folder. When you do that, it counts them all, and you click OK, and then it populates them in here, and then I go in and I have to sort them by date added so that they're in there the way they should be. Although, remember, you see why those are down there? Because those are the 5 I had to fix. Ha ha! They're not where they should be. But anyway, find an empty slot in your unit. I just picked one here, and then pick on one and pick 15. And then if you look on your unit, if you click AUTO-AUDITION and click that, notice how it's now underlined. That's how you know AUTO-AUDITION is on. It is now loaded into the buffer on your unit. It's not written over here yet. It can be, but it's in the buffer of your unit, and you can play it, and you can play all the scenes in it. And if you decide you like that sound, all you got to do is click this, drag it over here, and then click save. Pretty cool. So I hope this tutorial was good for you and helpful. Again, all this stuff is covered in the READMEs, but not everybody wants to read the READMEs. And you need to install those user cabs like I talked about and showed you how to do. And I think it's much better than it was. I think these are good improvements.